No one who's looking at this issue honestly wants this.
The only people who want this are the people who see billions of dollars of our tax dollars and billions of dollars worth of 45Q tax credits, which also is our money, and they want to make money. They don't even care whether or not this is actually something that's necessary or scientifically grounded or actually will help the environment. In fact, Danielle, if you watched the people who opposed all this CCS legislation in our own legislature this session, very, very rarely, if ever, do you hear the argument based on the environmental good of carbon capture sequestration. You hardly ever hear it. Even they know it's a fraud. Even they know it's a scam. The argument that they make is, well, it's going to bring jobs. It's going to bring jobs. Yeah, it's going to bring jobs that are propped up and paid for with our money. That's what it's going to do. Those are not legitimate private enterprise jobs. This enterprise would fall flat on its face if it were not for federal tax subsidies and our direct tax dollars. And they know that too. So the whole thing is a complete scam being perpetrated on our citizens. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom. It's another week of session, and there's a lot to talk about. We thought we would be having Caroline Gabriel, who's an attorney at William Most's firm, joining us this morning, but she was unable to join us. So we will just be giving you an overview of the week ahead, and there is plenty there. Before we get into it, let me start us off right with the scripture of the day. It's Proverbs chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. And it says, y'all, not the Lord's flavor. Danielle, I'm sure it's a good flavor.
It's the Lord's favor and the Lord's flavor. I want the Lord's flavor.
We are the Lord's flavor. All right. The Lord's favor flows to those whose hearts and intentions are pure. There's something so valuable to the Lord about a pure and a teachable heart, and there are the people who have a pure and teachable heart. These are the ones who are going to enjoy his favor and remain connected to him even when difficulties in life come. And this passage says that a devious heart invites his condemnation, which sounds pretty strong, but that's not something that the lovers of God need to fear. As long as we keep inviting him to search our hearts and motives, and as we respond appropriately when he corrects us. And Paul reiterates this point in chapter 7 and 8 of Romans. He says, "Now my renewed mind is fixed on and submitted to God's righteous principles. So now the case is closed. There remains no accusing voice of condemnation against those who are joined in life union with Jesus, the Anointed One." So be encouraged. If you are seeking the Lord, there's absolutely no condemnation for you. And in fact, the gift of the Lord's favor is with you. And however, if you're devious and not turning to him, then yeah, you will be subject to his condemnation until you do.
Yeah. It's hard, Danielle, it's simple, but it's difficult sometimes to fully surrender and to stop the habit of self-condemnation.
Yeah.
It's when you really think about it, it's overwhelming to think that there's no condemnation in Christ because we are often busy condemning ourselves, and unable to forgive ourselves. And, it can be difficult to recognize. It's like, what do you mean, me? Are you serious? I mean, it's like, what do you mean there's no condemnation? Look at all the stupid things I've done in my life, but that really is the devil talking to us.
It's true, because we don't get any rewards for hanging on to unforgiveness for ourselves.
We really don't. In fact, we do ourselves a profound disservice.
Yeah.
But it's all unmerited grace. We really can't do it ourselves. It's only God's grace that allows us the sort of liberation that comes through him. And we have to remember that. No more self-condemnation.
That's right. I like that. Chris, it's Tuesday, but it feels like it's Thursday already.
Yes, it does.
Yesterday was a busy day at the Capitol, which is pretty unusual for a Monday mid-session, I would say. There was a fair bit going on. not that much that we were following closely, but a couple things. And why don't we start out with what hit committee yesterday was Representative Raymond Cruz brought back his bill to establish gold and silver as legal currency in the state, his House Bill 386, and it passed
Yeah.
by the thinnest margin possible.
Yeah, it passed 7-6. It was a streamlined version of his original bill because it will not have the specific backing of the state, and there will not be a depository set up, but it does establish gold and silver as transactional currency in Louisiana and can be used with a gold-backed debit card, just like fiat money. So it is a step in the right direction, and it's still a good bill, still a good movement forward. But unfortunately, there were some Republicans who, despite the fact that it was completely not objectionable, he cured their original objections when he went in the first time, and yet still there were a number of Republicans who voted against this very important bill, and it passed out of Commerce, House Commerce, 7-6. But the Republicans, Danielle, who still voted against it for the second time. Would you like to know who they are?
Please tell me.
Representative Kim Carver, Representative Troy Hebert, Representative Jessica Domingue, Representative Neil Reiser, Representative Vincent St. Blanc, Representative Peggy Thomas. All Republicans who voted. Polly Thomas, I'm sorry, my bad, who voted against it nonetheless. Dixon McMakin, to his credit, switched his vote from the first time that it went before to enable it to pass 7-6. But it is obviously, we're thankful that the bill passed and is going on to the House floor, but it's unfortunate in a Republican-dominated Commerce Committee that the vote was even that close.
Well, it's despicable. And I think, Chris, we should go and look at the bios of these committee members because I'm convinced that not a single one of them understands anything about the free enterprise system to start with at the most basic level. The other thing is this just proves, yeah, I'm absolutely right.
I think you're right.
I have no doubt that I'm right. And the other point I just want to make is, I had a great thought, Chris. It just shows that their objections were hollow to start with. Their objections, if their objections were truly allayed, as Representative Cruz took to heart what they said, he changed the bill accordingly. He represented the bill in a format that should be palatable based on their strong objections.
Yes.
Stated objections, and they still refused to vote for it. That means that those objections were not real.
Yes, and it was because, once again, the bankers, the banking industry, the Louisiana Bankers Association was against the bill. So once again, these Republicans sided with big banks instead of with ordinary Louisiana citizens who deserve to have every economic option, including transactional gold and silver. So 7-6 vote. Fortunately, it's going on to the House floor, and we're going to keep pushing hard.
Yeah, while they continue to gaslight us and tell us that they're protecting us from ourselves.
Yes, exactly. Protecting us from our own choices and our own freedom.
Despicable. Yeah. It's absolutely despicable.
It is despicable. And there was one other vote yesterday, Danielle, that I want to tell you about. This was House Bill 685 by Emily Chenevert. And we've talked about this before. This is the bill, the DEI bill, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, that will abolish these leftist Marxist concepts like critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, disdain for the Constitution, will abolish those concepts entirely from our public agencies in the state of Louisiana. What Republicans could possibly oppose this, could vote against this? Who knows the poison that these concepts and these doctrines cause? Well, this bill,
Republicans?
Yeah, right. Well, I guess so, yeah. So this was on the House floor yesterday for final vote. It passed, thank God, 57-32, but there were several.
That's not nearly wide enough.
That's not nearly wide enough for a bill like this. I'm thankful for the Republicans who supported it, obviously, but there were several Republicans who voted against this bill. And one of them was Representative Vincent Cox. One of them was Representative Beth Billings, also a Republican. One of them was Representative Jeff Wiley, 3 Republicans, it looks like, voted against a bill to abolish Marxist concepts from our public agencies in the state of Louisiana. Emily Chenevert did a fabulous job defending her bill on the floor. I think it's worth also mentioning the Republicans who were absent for this
Yeah,
critical.
because clearly there were a number of them. That doesn't add up to 103.
No, the number that were absent for this critical vote: Representative Boriak, Representative Broad, Representative Domain, Representative Fontenot, Representative Freiberg, Representative Gadberry, Representative Hilferty, Representative Kerner, Representative Jacob Landry, Representative Muscarello, Representative Stagney, Representative Ventrilla, and Representative Wilder were all absent for this vote. And do you know what's somewhat suspicious about this? All of these who were absent for this vote were present for the vote immediately preceding this vote on the floor. So I don't know what the motive is to be absent for this vote, which is so important, but these Republicans were absent, and it's worth mentioning, in addition to the 3, as I said, who voted no on it.
Yeah. And for some of those, you can assume that maybe it was time for a restroom break. This is what I would
Sure.
like to hope, Chris. I'd like to hope that it was time for a restroom break. They felt this was a strong bill that was going to pass no problem, and they took the opportunity to go and get, some refreshments.
Yeah,
But the truth is, a lot of those names are names that we consistently hear on the wrong side of issues. So it's just a little difficult to continually try and assume the best.
exactly. No doubt about it.
Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about from what happened yesterday, Chris, before we move on to
No,
Tuesday?
but I did want to reiterate once again, Cox, Billings, and Wiley all voted against this DEI bill.
Yeah, it's
All
unbelievable.
Republicans. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Well, it'd be interesting to know what their objection was.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I don't know that there is an objection that's palatable because the
No.
bill is very good. Anybody can go read it, A685, and it's high time. It's past time, to be honest with you, that this garbage gets out of our public agencies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope that and a lot more gets out of our public agencies.
Perhaps even some of the people who are in our public agencies.
Yeah. They can go right along with it. The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, help balance the body's pH, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. I've heard firsthand testimonials from droppers in their 20s to droppers in their 80s who say that the Slender Eyes drops have completely revolutionized their lives. Try the drops today to see the results for yourself. To learn more about the Slender Eyes drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at info@freedomstate.us and put drops in the subject line, or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. We also have links to those in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the state of freedom. Right. So today is going to be quite a busy day, starting in House Natural Resources and Environment, 9 o'clock. Chris, I believe you were planning to be down there to testify on Senator Facey's SB 46. This is his bill that would ban geoengineering and weather modification. That one is up this morning.
Yes, and keep in mind HB 608, which is the companion bill on this in the House by Representative Coates, passed last week. This is the Senate version, SB 46, Senator Mike Facey. And anybody who listens to our show understands the dangers of this chemtrails, of all these chemicals and these dangerous toxins that are being pushed out of the back of these airplanes into our skies and then fall on us. This bill will prohibit that. And as you said, it's going before House Natural Resources this morning. And I do plan to be there to vigorously testify in favor of that bill.
Beautiful. All right. And I would just mention that a couple of people who have not been voting the right way on carbon capture in that House Natural Resources Committee do have Senator Facey as their senator. So I'm hopeful that they will give him that respect and respect the will of the people on this one and vote the right way.
Let's hope so. This is one of those bills where why would a conservative Republican object to a bill like this?
Yeah. I mean, Chris, as I've been talking to people this week, I mean, which it seems like it's been 2 weeks this week and it's only Tuesday. One thing that continually comes to mind is that this party system is so corrupt. You know, our parties are so infiltrated. The Republicans are just, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say this. You know, I've never been stabbed in the back by a Democrat. They always come at me head first. You know where they're coming from. It's the Republicans who stab me in the back. And someone said that if we could see all the stabbings look like, they would look like a porcupine. So it's just unbelievable, and I think that's why it's so important that we remain vigilant. It's also so important why folks go to lacag.org and do the calls to action, because we have to continue the drumbeat of pressure on these legislators, because we cannot ever assume they're going to do the right thing,
No,
ever.
no, you really can't. Many of them do the right thing because of pressure, not because of principle. Interesting point, Danielle, in line with what you just said. Tucker Carlson, I heard him say the other night that exactly what you just said, that it's not the Democrats who really pose the most sinister threat to us.
Mm-mm.
It is the Republicans, because the Democrats tell you what they believe. There's no question about it. They don't hide it from you. Whereas Republicans are much more deceptive in terms of their betrayal of the citizens. And so you have to watch them much, much more closely, because they understand that they have a vested interest often in concealing what they're really doing in the legislature from their own voters, because they know that they couldn't be reelected if their voters knew often what they're actually doing. And that's the reason why we exist, to keep track of all this and to make sure that their voters do know what's really going on.
And I think that's the danger of having such a deep red state, is that these politicians know they can't get elected with a D behind their name in a lot of localities. And so they just switch to Republican, but they keep all of their values. They keep all of their, I'll just say values. And then they bring those, but they bring them under the sheen, under the cover of conservatism, because that's what got them elected, is these conservative talking points. And then they come and behave, according to their values or according to special interest pressure, because they don't have values. And
Yes.
that's the big, I think, danger of Republican dominated states. And
Well
it's
said.
exactly why we're seeing what we're seeing right now.
Very
And
well
I think
said.
it's exactly why we saw what happened in 2020 up till now.
Yeah. Very well said, Danielle. And again, most organizations, they track floor votes, Senate floor votes and House floor votes. They don't really pay too much attention to what goes on in committee. If a bill dies in committee, they don't really talk about that, but we do. In addition to that, those committee votes are so important, or those committee absences are so important as well. Additionally, with regard to the floor votes, which we also follow, it's not only important to know who votes for and against important legislation, it's important to track who wasn't there for the vote and if there's a
Yeah.
pattern of absences. One of the ways that these Republicans try to conceal what they're really doing is simply by not being there for the vote. Because again, the tracking organizations usually just track who voted for and who voted against. And they usually don't follow who wasn't there. We follow who wasn't there, as in the case of HB 685, where there was 10 or 11 Republicans in a relatively close vote on a very important bill who were not there for the vote.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
I will give many of them the benefit of the doubt, as you said, Danielle. But when the ones who were absent for HB 685 were present at the vote immediately preceding that, that does raise some suspicion as to why they were not there for that vote.
Yeah. And I think, Chris, one other aspect that we'll be tracking, we do track that other groups do not track, is decorum. Are you just straight up rude to people who come and testify? Are you straight up rude unnecessarily to your colleagues? That's something that matters to me. I think it matters to you. And it's something that we will be reporting on. Whenever we see it, we'll call it out.
And it's very important to do that. It's possible to engage in vigorous and heated debate and keep it on the issues.
Yeah. Be respectful. That's it. All right, Chris. Well, Okay. Also happening today, after our long little rabbit trail there, House and Governmental Affairs at 9:30 in room 2 is Senator Alan Sebaw's SB 109, and this is his constitutional amendment, our proposed constitutional amendment to provide for foreign donations in elections, just keeping foreign donations out of elections. And I find it very hysterical that Senator Seabaugh is bringing this, and he cares so deeply about keeping foreign interference out of our elections, but doesn't seem to care, or actually vigorously defends the right to keep foreign interference in our elections through the voting computers.
Yeah, there's a real dichotomy there for sure. And I think it's simply because Senator Seabaugh doesn't believe, really, in the face of overwhelming evidence at this point, that computer-based voting systems are subject to malicious hacking and fraud and switching of election results, despite what President Trump has said, despite what Tulsi Gabbard has said, despite what Elon Musk has said, that these computer-based voting systems are not only hackable, but have been hacked and are subject to foreign interference. And if it's a good bill, SB 109, as far as it goes, because it does prohibit foreign money in any facet of our election system in Louisiana, state elections, ballot propositions, all the rest of it. But it does not say anything about the vulnerability of these computer-based voting systems as it relates to foreign adversaries getting into those systems, intruding into those systems. So you're right. And our system is never going to be complete and invulnerable to foreign interference until we understand how vulnerable the computers are.
Chris, it's not a difficult concept, right? I mean, anyone who has had their identity stolen, anyone who's had their credit card compromised knows that you can hack just about anything. And if you found out that your credit card was stolen, basically, just online stolen, and people started using it, would you just not call and cancel it? Would you just let them run up your bill? That's
Yeah,
that's where basically the concept.
that's exactly right. And the idea, Danielle, I know we've talked about this before. The idea that a piece of paper component, as our Secretary of State calls it, that is spit out by a hackable, vulnerable machine or computer that is reliable, and that makes our elections truly auditable, is a joke. It's an absolute joke. But Nancy Landry is trying to align herself, or suggest that she's aligned with the vision of the Trump administration, despite President Trump's EOs that are raising powerful alarms against these computer-based voting systems. She thinks because a piece of paper is spit out of a computer that makes our elections secure. And it's very important for our listeners to understand that it does not.
And I'm not sure she thinks it does, Chris. I think that she thinks that may be palatable to voters, but and maybe she can convince us that that is auditable, but I'm not convinced that she truly believes it's auditable.
And you're probably right.
Anyway. All right. Also today in House Administration of Criminal Justice at 10 o'clock, we have House Bill 457 by Representative Denise Marcel. This is her solitary confinement bill.
Yeah, and we asked Representative Marcel to include in that bill faith materials when an inmate is in solitary confinement. She said she included that in the bill. It's going before criminal justice in the House this morning, and we support that legislation.
Yeah. All right. There's a lot up for final passage today on the House side. First up is House Bill 75 by Representative Danny McCormick, and this is related to compensation for CCS pipeline, people who have the pipeline on their property, right?
That's correct. And basically what Representative McCormick's bill says is that if a person does not opt in for the pipeline, in other words, does not voluntarily allow their land to be seized or used for carbon capture and sequestration pipelines, and ends up being forced into what they call the unit, which is all affected landowners. If they hold out and ultimately they're forced into the unit, they cannot be penalized in any way in terms of the compensation that they receive for having to surrender their land. In fact, the bill guarantees that they receive maximum compensation. And that's why it's an important bill.
Yeah. It's an important bill because our legislators won't do the right thing, or
Yeah.
have yet to do the right thing.
Yeah. This is a Band-Aid, but it is a Band-Aid that is helpful.
Yeah, and necessary.
Yeah.
All right. Also up today for vote on the House floor is House Bill 160 by Representative Kelly Hennessy Dickerson, and this is her ethics complaints bill.
Yeah, and this is a bill that Representative Hennessy, as we talked about before, Danielle, was very amenable to our suggestion that she include in this bill whistleblower language to protect people who make a complaint to the ethics board against a public official or anyone else for that matter are not subject to any kind of retaliation. So the bill does two things. The bill makes the complainant no longer anonymous, so they have to disclose their identity at some point in the process. And to counterbalance that, there's a pretty strong provision against any sort of retaliation against the complainant. And the complainant, it can bring suit, and there are other penalties in the bill to protect the complainant from retaliation.
There's a couple good bills this session to tighten up the way the ethics board is handled. So I appreciate this one being brought by Representative Dickerson. Next up is House Bill 405 by Representative Matthew Willard. This one is requiring the Secretary of State to provide some updates with relate to any laws that are passed that affect the way our elections are run.
Yeah, it's a transparency bill that requires the Secretary of State to be open and fully disclose prominently changes in our election laws. One of the things that you suggested to me, Danielle, that needs to be included in this bill is a specific provision with regard to procurement, where the Secretary of State has to be very transparent about the process whereby she is trying to secure a new voting system for our state, because there's no more important issue. When are the meetings? When are the public meetings, Secretary Landry? What are you going to be discussing at these meetings with regard to the procurement process? At what stage of the process are you in? When will the public have an opportunity to come in and make their opinions known and felt about how we feel about the proposed new system? Because she has not been fully transparent on this issue, or really on a number of other issues related to our election system. So I think it's important to add a provision in this bill that requires her to be fully transparent with regard to the procurement process.
Yeah, and I think a fair notice for all those public meetings as well, related whether it's related to the procurement process, which is first and foremost in terms of importance, but any public meetings, you can't just give people. People need fair notice to be able to show up from all over the state.
Of course they do, and they would show up if they had the notice.
Yeah. All right. House Bill 400 is also up today for final vote on the House floor, and that's Representative Chenevier's parental consent for minors. This hopefully is not going to be too controversial today. Chris, you have any predictions on this one?
I think it should pass. Hopefully there won't be too many absent Republicans.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, once again, Danielle, can you imagine Republicans either voting no or being absent on a bill that simply, as a broad rule, requires that parents or guardians of minors be notified and consent to major surgical procedures or medical services provided to their minor children? Would you ever think that we would be living in an age when you would have to wonder about whether Republicans are going to vote for that bill or show up for that important vote?
Yeah. I'm
I don't
done with
think
the
so.
party system.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
But we're going to be
Yeah.
watching it very, very closely. I believe it's going to pass, and I certainly hope it does, and it should pass overwhelmingly.
It should. Yeah. And honestly, bipartisanly.
Well, exactly. I mean, there are some good Democrats. You and I have found ourselves on a number of occasions on the side of the Democrats on certain bills that are very, very important. So I think that Democrats, a number of Democrats may come on board and vote in favor of this.
Several voted in favor in committee. So I think we can expect that. Yeah. All right. Senate final passage today. We have SB 80, which is Senator Greg Miller, one of who continues to surprise me, not in a good way, his exit polling bill that he is carrying for Secretary Landry to silence the voice of the people at the polls.
Yeah, there are exactly the bill, as our listeners know, SB 80 prohibits regular citizens from conducting exit polls, and it reserves that quote unquote right to bona fide news gathering organizations like CNN. You know, CNN, how much we trust CNN and how much we believe that they're always telling us the truth. They're the only ones now who will be able to do exit polls. lawful exit polls. And by the way, I went back and did some research on this, Danielle. I looked at the Texas law and other states.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few states that have any major restrictions on people being able to do exit polls. Most of the states, it's 100 yards. If you're non disruptive and you're simply asking questions about how a person voted voluntarily, then you can do an exit poll. And there's not one state that I found that makes a distinction between ordinary law abiding citizens and bona fide news organizations. So if this bill passes, we're going to be the only state in the country that specifically prohibits law abiding citizens from conducting exit polls. And the reason why Secretary Landry is pushing this bill so hard is not because she's concerned about disruptions, not because she's concerned about voters being harassed. That's a complete joke. The reason why she doesn't want citizens there doing exit polls is because she does not want the myth that our computer based voting system is safe and secure to be exploded by the gathering of real data at voting precincts about how people actually voted and then comparing it against the official results from that precinct or other precincts. That's really what's going on here. Nancy Landry does not want any suspicion raised about computer based voting systems on which she is running at lightning speed to spend $150 million of our tax dollars on that. So that's what this is all about. It's an unconstitutional restriction of speech. It's an unconstitutional restriction of freedom of association. And it's just a deplorable piece of legislation. And it's going for final vote on the Senate
Yeah, Senate
on the
floor.
Senate floor today. Now it still has to go over to the House after that, but we have a strong call to action up on this. So if you care about your free speech, and Danielle, I don't mean to go on too much about this, but a lot of people may look at this and say, why is this a big deal? I don't do exit polls. The reason why it's a big deal is that this is how liberty is ultimately lost. If you don't stand up and oppose on principle a blatantly unconstitutional restriction of free speech and freedom of association, then it only gets larger and larger and larger. And that's why James Madison said that it is what death by a thousand cuts. We don't wait until the last minute to stand up for our freedom. We need to do it right now as a matter of principle and precedent.
That's right. And as much as I hate those billboards, the ambulance chasing billboards that line the interstates across our state, there's a two-edged sword with our eagerness to litigate. And I bet there are any number of attorneys who would be happy to take this on should it make it all the way through. This is going to have suit so fast and so hard. I mean, of course, it ultimately only costs us. So when our legislature passes unconstitutional bills, we're the ones who pay. We pay for the attorney's fees on the litigant side, right? We pay for the attorney's fees
For the
on the defendant
defense,
side.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's no question about it. So it's just bad all the way around. It's bad constitutionally, it's bad fiscally, and it's just bad policy.
Yeah, I do wish we could get a lot of those criminal defense attorneys who are focused on accidents and insurance claims to focus more on suing for unconstitutional bills. I bet we'd have a lot smaller constitution. I bet
Yeah,
we'd have a lot fewer, a lot thinner uh, bureaucracy
I
in our
think you're
state.
right.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Senate Bill 117 by Senator Blake Miguez. This is his bill that would ban ultra-processed food in schools.
Yeah, and this bill should not have any trouble passing. It's similar to Senator McMath's bill. Get the junk out of the food. There are a lot of kids in this state who eat breakfast and lunch at school. Give them healthy options. That's this is a no-brainer. Especially when you consider the obesity epidemic, Danielle, the chronic disease epidemic among our youth.
80.
80, give them healthy options to eat. I can't imagine why anybody would oppose this.
Yeah. How about only healthy options?
Only healthy options.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Senate Bill 39 by Senator Jay Morris. This is his bill that essentially would say that it's you have no recourse if we hold you past your out date in prison.
Fortunately, Danielle, because of a lot of concerns raised by us and others, this bill has been gutted to a significant degree. So it's not nearly as nefarious as it was before. In original form, the bill would have essentially immunized the state from liability for their own errors, for keeping inmates in jail well past their out date, which is false imprisonment. It's unconstitutional, it's illegal. But instead of correcting the problem, they want to immunize the people who create the problem. Now, fortunately, a lot of the immunity provisions have been cut out of the bill now because of concerns, as I said, but it's still not needed. The legislation is not needed. The process whereby an inmate can get some relief for a flagrant violation of their liberty and their freedom is already onerous enough, and it doesn't need to be made more onerous through this legislation. So,
Yeah.
we
You know what's
obviously,
ironic?
yeah,
Okay, so we have all these tough on crime Republicans, right? Especially in our executive branch, but also in the legislature. And then we have the biggest jailbreak making national news in New Orleans right now with 10 escapees. Why don't you focus on the criminals you have already detained? Why don't you focus on getting them out of there on time, rehabilitating them, making sure that there is not a giant hole in the cinder block that the entire groups of men can escape from? Why don't you focus on that? This is an embarrassment. Our state is a laughing stock right now, and we're still doubling down to be tough on crime. It's ridiculous. I was wondering whenever I saw the faces, the mugshots of those 10 men flash up on the screen, some of whom look very scary, by the way. How many of them have actually should already be out?
well, I don't know. Let's assume for a minute that none of them. Let's assume for a minute that none of them should be out, and they probably are all
Yeah,
legitimately
I'm sure.
incarcerated. So instead of keeping in prison inmates who have served their time and paid their dues weeks and months and years after their out dates, which invites lawsuits, which we pay for, instead of that, why don't you try to keep in jail the hardened criminals who actually belong there instead of letting them escape? That's a great point, Danielle. Maybe we refocus our priorities a bit here.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of our if we what happens maybe Chris if Emily Chenevier's bill passes and we get some of the DEI out of some of these different agencies, maybe we'll have better managed agencies.
You know what? And I never even thought about that, but there is a very powerful connection between the diversity, equity, and inclusion and the lack of merit based performance evaluations and hiring and that sort of thing, and the inefficiency with which so many of our public agencies are run,
Yeah.
Danielle,
Yeah.
because it's not about merit. It's not about excellence very often. It's about political correctness, which breeds uniform mediocrity.
Yeah. It does. All right. Next up, Senate Bill 214. This is by Senator Royce Duplessis. This would basically give the right, so it would make it so that Commissioner of Insurance is no longer an elected position, but instead is appointed by the governor. This is tiring. This is really tiring.
Yeah, it really.
Obviously this is, the pet of the governor, this bill.
Why should the Commissioner of Insurance, a statewide elected position, not be subject to direct vote of the people? I don't care what other states are doing. They're not Louisiana. And if this were going on in those states and I lived there, I would be opposed to this as well. I mean, why do you single out the Commissioner of Insurance? He should be directly accountable to the people, just like the governor, just like any other statewide elected official. But this bill will make the Commissioner of Insurance appointed by the governor by way of a nominating committee. The Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the Attorney General, and other agencies get to put forward nominees, and the governor chooses the Commissioner of Insurance from among that list. And first of all, it should be elected, as I said, an elected position. And secondly, why are we advancing legislation that increases the power of the executive branch in the state of Louisiana when the governor and the executive branch generally already have disproportionate power under our constitutional and political system? Why would we be doing that instead of decreasing and diminishing the power of the executive? The very reason why the legislature does not routinely exercise vigorous oversight as it's supposed to do over the executive branch is because they're afraid of the governor. They're afraid of reprisal, which often is legitimate fear. that there will be reprisal if they oppose him. It
So
doesn't
suck it
justify.
up and take it.
Yeah, it
Suck it
doesn't
up and take it.
justify their inaction by any
No.
means, but that's the reality of it. So why would we be increasing his power? It doesn't make
Right.
any sense. It's
No.
SB 214. And by the way, this is being brought by a Democrat, Royce Duplessis, who's about as far left in the state Senate as you can get. I can't think of anybody right off who is more left than Royce Duplessis. This is the same state senator who wanted to decriminalize male adult prostitution
Prostitution.
in Louisiana, I think a couple of years ago, which
Yeah.
failed.
Yeah, it
Fortunately,
did.
once we
Yeah.
brought the committee's
Brought it
attention
to
to what
light.
exactly the bill did. But the bottom line is, this is a terrible bill. I don't know, because Governor Landry, his finger, you'll never be able to trace this to him. But I would be very surprised, and I'd bet you 9 cents to a dime that Governor Landry is behind this legislation.
Well, I would hope, Chris, that some Democrats on the House side or even in the Senate would take opposition to this. And I would like to see this amended so that instead of the governor having the authority to appoint the insurance commissioner, simply that the insurance commissioner should have some experience in insurance, because I believe Tim Temple is the first insurance commissioner we've had in decades, if not longer, who actually comes from the industry. And I'm not saying they need to necessarily come from the industry, but they need to have some level, a deep level of familiarity with it so that they can do the negotiating in a educated manner, if whether it's someone who's worked on it from a contracting side or someone who's worked on with insurance companies from a legal side. I think those would be reasonable requirements for the position.
Exactly. And Danielle, final point on this from my perspective. Can you imagine right now if we had a system where the commissioner of insurance was appointed by Governor Landry? So let's just say hypothetically, our current commissioner had been appointed by Governor Landry. Instead of having a vigorous debate among the governor and the commissioner of insurance about the best way to go about solving our insurance problems in Louisiana, we would have a commissioner insurance that is simply rubber stamping and doing the bidding of the governor. That's
You're
what would
exactly
be
right.
occurring right now. And that is the danger of what will happen if we come to a point where the governor is appointing the commissioner of insurance in Louisiana.
Well, that's clearly what the governor wants, Chris. That's clearly what he wants for nearly every position, because that's what we're seeing is a strong push to continue to give more and more power to the executive. It's
Exactly.
unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. Anyone who understands federalism, as you've said many times on this show, anyone who understands a government of, by, and for the people would not want that. And I had high hopes, Chris, that when Governor Landry came in, that he would have the courage and actually the will, the tenacity, the foresight to start diminishing the power of the executive while he sat there. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing?
Yeah, it would have been very Marcus Aurelius like, who was, a great, great leader of the Roman Empire for 17 or 18 years. And yet he was very humble, very statesmanlike, and never allowed that power to go to his head, and really did make the country and the empire much more efficient and much less corrupt. You go back, Danielle, and you look at Governor Landry's inaugural address. And I've gone back and read his inaugural address a couple of times now. And it's very statesmanlike in the way that it's written, in the ideals that are articulated. And then you go and contrast that with the way he has governed. The discrepancy between the two is shocking. And maybe it shouldn't be at this point, but it is. But
All right.
anyway,
Yeah. Okay. Next up for Senate, is this Senate floor debate today? Yeah. Senate floor debate today is Senate Bill 216 by Senator Valerie Hodges. This is her contract bidding for DOTD to discourage delays and incentivize the early completion of road construction projects. Hopefully, you're not expecting too much opposition to this one, Chris.
I don't think so. And I know this is one of your favorite bills
Yeah.
because the bill creates real incentives to finish the state road projects timely and disincentives not to. And God knows we need it. Do we not need more efficiency in our DOTD when it comes to completing these projects? I mean, go different places in the state, Danielle, and it seems like they've been working on these things, certain things, for years and years and years. And I'm like,
Because they have.
why does it take so long to finish these projects?
Well, clearly it's got to be perverse incentives and poor oversight. I can't come up with any other reasons.
And I think this bill would go a long way in solving that problem.
Yeah, I hope so. Also by Senator Hodges, her Senate Bill 226, which we know was slashed with the sword in the committee and gutted out basically everything that was meaningful, that had teeth, that was going to protect our elections and protect our immovable property, was taken out of it. But it looks like her bill is subject to call. We saw Senator Morris and Senator Jay Luno give her a very hard time on the Senate floor with some really I think just despicable and I don't know, disingenuous, I guess is the word I'm looking for, questions
Yeah,
related to the nature of her bill.
to the bill. And Senator Luno and Senator Miller, by the way, sit on Miller's the chairman and Luno's on Senate Jude A, the very committee that gutted SB 226 in original form, which would have halted the procurement of computer-based voting systems until President Trump's executive orders, the evaluation that he has ordered is completed on these electronic-based voting systems, and would have allowed expropriation of any property currently owned by a foreign adversary that's located within 50 miles of a critical infrastructure facility. Both of those things were gutted from this bill in committee. So now it's on the Senate floor. I don't even know what's left of it at this point, to be honest with you, Danielle. But the point is, we can't forget what occurred.
No, and I'll reiterate a point I made last week, Chris, which is this I think in the 4-year span of the legislator's term, right? We're in the second year. So this is the year in a way that's furthest from any election. So this is the year they think they can go rogue. They think they can not necessarily be held to account for the way that they vote, but they are sorely, sorely mistaken if they think that's true.
Yeah.
Because we are watching them and we will not forget their behavior, because next year, coming the summer, they're going to be starting to campaign for reelection. And guess who's going to be blasting them into next week, into next year, into the next decade? That's going to be us.
That's going to be us, because we're documenting it all right now, and we will remind the voters, just as we're reminding everybody right now, Danielle,
Yeah.
about what they're doing. But at
Yeah.
election time, it'll be prominently displayed. There's no question about that, because it has to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my shot across the bow that I'll keep making, reminding people we will not forget. All right, next up on Wednesday. Tomorrow's a big day too, Chris. It's not quite as bad as last week, thankfully. First up in Senate and Governmental Affairs, there is House Bill 216 by Representative Steve Jackson. This is his bill that would simply mandate that the Board of Ethics meetings be recorded publicly and broadcast publicly.
And they should be. And it's a
Yes,
good
they
bill,
absolutely should be.
and we're going to be supporting it.
Yep. All right. Next is House Bill 577 by Representative Darrell Desautels. This is about procurement for voting systems. This is basically giving Secretary of State Nancy Landry everything she wants with a cherry on top.
Yes, this is one of a number of pieces of legislation being strongly pushed by the Secretary of State to allow her to streamline this procurement process, to make it easier and quicker for her to write the check for $150 million worth of computer-based voting systems. That's what this bill does. It's a dangerous bill, HB 577, and we are opposing it, and we have a strong call to action up right now at lacag.org Action Center on 577. We encourage everyone to go and do that call to action immediately.
Yeah. And I can think of any number, literally countless areas of our government that could use streamlining, and this is not one of them.
This is absolutely not one of them, because right now, under the normal procurement process, Danielle, it requires competitive bidding. It requires a protracted process to make sure that what we invest in with regard to our voting system is secure, is reliable, is safe. It's extremely important. Well, she wants to streamline that whole process, vest herself with almost plenary authority, with very little oversight, to go forward and do whatever she wants to do. And 577 is one bill that would allow that to happen. And it's a very, very, very important that everyone go do this call to action on HB 577.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. Yeah. Also up is House Bill 590 by Representative Annie Spell, and this is the House companion bill, the statutory companion bill to Senator Sebaugh's bill to keep foreign funds out of our elections.
Yes, this is a good bill. I'll just say the same thing about this that I did about Senator Sebaugh's bill. These bills should be addressing the vulnerabilities of the computer-based voting systems as well. If we're trying to protect our elections from foreign adversaries, it's not complete without a strong provisions related to computer voting in Louisiana.
Yeah.
We do support the bill. It's good as far as it goes. It just doesn't go far enough.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Chris. What it's called single object, right? Single object? It's been the terminology they like to use whenever the critical infrastructure bill that Senator Hodges brought. I just feel like that could come back around to bite them. We'll see.
Yeah.
All
You're
right.
talking about HB 471?
I was talking about her Senate Bill 226 that they gutted because they said that it was not single
Dual
object. But yeah, dual object.
The dual object. Yeah.
I think that it can still be single object if they were able to, if someone had the bravery, the fortitude to suggest an amendment to include keeping foreign voting components, foreign mechanical and software components out of our election system.
Yeah, and Danielle, the reason why they used the dual object objection in Senate Jude as a pretext
Yeah,
to take all the Secretary of State provisions out of it, all the election provisions out of it, because that dealt with elections and other part of the bill dealt with other infrastructure issues. But the bottom line is it's not a dual object because the fundamental thing that all the issues had in common was it all dealt with critical infrastructure. That's why it was in the same bill, and it should have remained there.
Yeah, it should have remained there. All right. Next up, House Health and Welfare on Wednesday. We have a lot of good bills that are moving getting close to the final resting place. I mean that in a positive sense, not in a negative sense. Senate Bill 2 by Senator Mike Facey. This is his bill to get fluoride out of our water systems. Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord for that. Let's get it out. There is, as we talked about before, Danielle, there is an amendment in the bill that would allow local jurisdictions by vote of 15% to put it on a parish-wide ballot to put the fluoride back in if they wanted to. But the presumption is that it's going out. We don't think there's going to be a problem with it. And everybody knows how detrimental all this fluoride is in our water.
Yeah. The only thing I take issue with, Chris, on this one is its effective date is August 1st. I think that it should be effective immediately. There's no need for, once this bill passes, for them to continue to poison us.
I agree. So it's permissible to poison us for another 5 or 6 months?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Next up, Senate Bill 14 by Senator Patrick McMath. This is his Maha bill, basically make Louisiana healthy again, getting a lot of dyes and garbage out of the school food meals.
Very similar to Senator Maguez's bill, and we support it for the same reasons.
Yeah. Also up in the same committee is Senate Bill 19 by Senator Facey, and this is his ivermectin being able to be dispensed without a prescription.
Very, very important bill. Very important bill. And, we have a call to action up on SB 19 right now. A lot of people have responded to it. A lot of people are very interested in this bill, and most people are supporting it. And I can't imagine a reason why anybody would not be.
Yeah. And last but not least, set for House floor debate tomorrow is House Bill 601 by Representative Brett Guyman, and this is his bill about eminent domain rules for carbon capture.
Interestingly, Danielle, as I may have said on the last show, I can't remember, but this bill, which would require a landowner to consent and agree to having carbon capture sequestration pipelines on their land, he doesn't know for sure now if he has the Republican votes to pass this bill.
Unbelievable.
That simply it's a bill that would protect fundamental private property rights in Louisiana from carbon capture sequestration pipelines. against a landowner's will, and he doesn't know for sure if he has the votes, which is why I think he had to move it from yesterday to Wednesday. And we have to continue. But we have a call to action up on this one as well. So please go do this call to action. These people respond to a lot of public pressure from the citizens. And often, as you said earlier, Danielle, that's the only thing they respond to. But if HB 601 does not pass, we are going to be documenting meticulously the Republicans who voted against this or the Republicans who were absent for this legislation.
Yeah. And Chris, on that note, we have a guest coming on Thursday morning for our show. Her name is Carla Lems. She is a sitting representative in the South Dakota legislature. She's running for lieutenant governor of South Dakota, and she, along with many others, led the charge in South Dakota to make it so that eminent domain was not allowed for corporate takeover of private property for carbon capture. So it will be a very interesting conversation with her on Thursday. I think very enlightening. I think, we've actually shared some swamp creatures here in Louisiana, have taken in some of South Dakota's swamp creatures. I had that conversation with her on the phone yesterday. So maybe she'll also share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, she can share some swamp creatures. And Danielle, I want to remind our listeners in South Dakota, there was a crop of Republicans that killed eminent domain, very similar legislation that good conservatives are trying to pass here in Louisiana. It was killed in South Dakota a couple of years ago. And that crop of Republicans were punished severely by the citizens at the voting booth. 13 or 14 Republicans were swept out of office, the very ones who opposed that legislation, brought in a new crop, and they passed the legislation right now that exists in South Dakota, which is the law prohibiting eminent domain for carbon capture. So who knows what may happen here in Louisiana, but I guarantee you our citizens have the eyes on them.
Yeah, because the truth is what we've been saying, Chris. No one who's looking at this issue honestly wants this.
The only people who want this are the people who see billions of dollars of our tax dollars and billions of dollars worth of 45Q tax credits, which also is our money, and they want to make money. They don't even care whether or not this is actually something that's necessary or scientifically grounded or actually will help the environment. In fact, Danielle, if you watched the people who opposed all this CCS legislation in our own legislature this session, very, very rarely, if ever, do you hear the argument based on the environmental good of carbon capture sequestration. You hardly ever hear it. Even they know it's a fraud. Even they know it's a scam. The argument that they make is, well, it's going to bring jobs. It's going to bring jobs. Yeah, it's going to bring jobs that are propped up and paid for with our money. That's what it's going to do. Those are not legitimate private enterprise jobs. This enterprise would fall flat on its face if it were not for federal tax subsidies and our direct tax dollars. And they know that too. So the whole thing is a complete scam being perpetrated on our citizens. And you get back to 601 here, Danielle, which is the most important piece of legislation right now that will give the citizens some protection against eminent domain for these pipelines. 601, we're going to be keeping a very close eye on this. And I hope the Republicans already have learned a lesson, the ones who opposed the CCS legislation originally in committee. And I hope they come on board and do what they need to do to pass this legislation and get it to the governor's desk.
Yeah, I hope so too. I absolutely hope so too, because I don't think we need to. This is very much like the cockroach bill. This is not a bill that we need to be fighting every session. There's important things that we need to do. Let's get this passed. Let's protect the citizens. Let's listen to the voice of the people, and let's move forward.
Exactly. Let's just do it and just do your duty. Just do your duty. That's all we're asking. We're not asking for anything else. Just honor the Constitution and do your duty.
That's right. Well, everyone, please go to lacag.org, lacag.org, and do those calls to action this morning. You can do them once a day, so maybe you just want to set a reminder on your calendar to go to LACAG every day and do your calls to action. Make sure that your legislators hear from you loud and clear, because then they will have no excuse on how they voted. Also, if you would visit us over at freedomstate.us, you can support some of our Some of our sponsors and affiliate partners would appreciate that. And Chris, I know you got to be released to go run down to the Capitol. You're probably running late as it is.
Yeah, I'm running a little bit late, but don't worry. Party can't start till a CAG gets there.
Well, that's right.
But I do want to reiterate your encouragement, Danielle, for everyone to subscribe, share the State of Freedom. Communication is so important. And the more broadly we are able to communicate and share critical information across the state, the more informed we're going to be, the better educated we're going to be, the more wisely we're going to vote, and ultimately the better government we're going to have. So please share and subscribe to the State of Freedom and tell all your family and friends about it, because you're not going to find a platform like this one. I promise you. Danielle, have a great day. Love you, and we shall meet again.
Yep. See you on Thursday morning, Chris.
Sounds good.
Bright and early. All right. The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.